Thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Currently, I've been kind of recovering from the rough week, I would say, that I had leading up to Jasmine's birthday, which was last Saturday. You know, grief can really take a lot out of you. It's pretty exhausting at times. And really, I ended up being fine most of the day until we lit her candle and started singing her happy birthday. Then the tears started and wouldn't stop. How I wish she could have been here. We could be singing to her in person. My son asked why I looked like I was crying, and I told him it's because I am crying. He came and gave me a really big hug and said that he misses Jasmine too. I miss her so much, and I make an effort to make sure she's included in our family things and that her siblings know about her too. I always feel slight relief when the day's over. It's kind of like, okay, I made it through another year. Hopefully some of you understand and can relate to that. So today I am talking with Melissa. She lost her son due to her developing pre-eclampsia and HELLP syndrome, and then she went through gastric bypass surgery and was able to get pregnant again with her rainbow baby. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Melissa. Melissa, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am 30, almost 31 this month. We had decided quickly, to start trying for our baby right around our wedding, and I had stopped our birth control. And I believe it was the third cycle after, which actually ended up being right after our honeymoon, that we got pregnant with our first baby boy. I've always wanted a boy, so as soon as we figured out and found out that he was a boy, I was so excited. Everything was perfect and feeling like everything falling into place. It was meant to be. And then seemingly the pregnancy was pretty good. I did have issues with high blood pressure, but that was even previous to, sorry if they're sneezing in the background, that is my dog. I had previous issues with hypertension, but everything was maintained. And again, we were cloud nine, our first pregnancy, quicker than we thought it was going to happen. And pretty much, I would call it now, I was super naive. I thought, pregnancy meant healthy baby coming home. Once you get those positive, that's the outcome. At that point, I don't remember hearing much about losses or anything like that. And people still, at least around me, were hush hush because I haven't been surrounded or experienced it around me. And then we hit our anatomy scan and things were still pretty well. He was measuring a bit small, but both myself and my husband were smaller babies, so we all didn't think anything of it. And then I think I started to swell pretty bad. And one point we went to the hospital because I also checked my blood pressure and it was super high, probably about 170s over 90s or 100s. And so we went into the hospital that first time and they did all the tests and everything were perfectly fine. It was just the high blood pressure. So all they did was they readjusted my meds and the blood pressure kind of regulated to a point. And then they told me to keep an eye out for right upper quadrant pain, probably right around the rib area. And I think at that point I was also put on bed rest, like I left work and everything just to, it was basically keep yourself nice and relaxed. And then 2 weeks later, I started to have that pain. I thought it was just, like a pulled muscle, being pregnant the first time. I didn't think anything too serious. And then I kept checking my blood pressure and it was staying pretty high. So we decided we'd go into the hospital. I kept my husband at home. I'm like, he worked the next morning. So I was like, stay home. I'll go with my parents. And then we did the same test that they did 2 weeks prior. However, this time it showed my liver and my kidneys were shutting down. My platelets had dropped quite significantly, and my blood pressure was sky high. Like I believe at one point it was even 200s over 120s, 130s. And they were at that point shocked that I was still conscious and pretty well fine other than the pain. They thought, and I was oblivious as to what was going on. I was just told they were admitting me and that I would possibly need a C-section. Um, and then that day is kind of a blur, but I had my sister-in-law there with us and a couple of our parents. And then doctors had come in and they're like, we're going to have to push all the C-sections today and we're going to get you in as soon as the one currently being done is complete. At that point, I already had one shot of steroid, and we almost had kind of this false hope things would still be okay. He would just spend a lot of time in NICU, and we were just preparing for that. I remember my sister-in-law had asked the doctor if they could wait 2 more hours to give me the second steroid shot. And from what I was told, because a lot of this did happen around my ear frame, was that they said that's not possible. If we even wait 2 hours, we could lose both of them. I had learned after the fact that I actually had severe preeclampsia as well as HELLP syndrome. And this is the first time I've ever heard of HELLP syndrome. I was kind of aware of preeclampsia, but I didn't know anything about HELLP. I did find out after it's a more rare version, very high in chances of mother and baby losses, one of the leading causes, and that it almost can happen to anyone. Of course, I was a larger girl, so I personally thought, oh, it's probably my size. I was unhealthy, something like that. But it was thank God for the nurses who kept telling me, it wasn't our fault. Even like athletes can get this. So I did a lot of education after the fact, and we ended up going in for the C-section. I think it was right around noon. It was January 21st. Um, And I remembered I didn't have a lot of sleep because of the pain for the last 2 days. And then they did the C-section, and all I remember is they had him in his hands and they took him to the back room right away. And I saw my husband go in that room, and like he looked at me through the window, like smile and thumbs up. And at that point, like I'm like, okay, I can relax. And I guess I had fallen asleep. And probably about 50 minutes later or so, when they're still closing me up, I had woken up and I saw my husband's face through the window, and I could just tell it's different. Um, he came out a lot smaller than the ultrasound even that day had told us. He, at almost 24 weeks, so 23 weeks and 4 days, he weighed 396 grams. He's probably measuring closer to almost a 20 weeker, which would explain why at our anatomy scan he was small. So apparently it was already affecting him from earlier on that we had no clue. Uh, he had fought for 54 minutes, but unfortunately he did pass. We had to make the decision that this was just, causing him more harm than anything else because they didn't have the right size tubes. They were either too big or they were too small, and they just couldn't get him ventilated, and his heart rate just kept dropping. They did tell me after the fact that they weren't even able to get the heart rate spiking at all at one point. So like I think like he even if they got him intubated, he probably still would not have made it. Um, and so I think we were about 27 at the time, and or 26, and this was the first experience with all of this happening. And it's weird because it's been almost 4 years, and it's almost like I can remember it like it was yesterday. And surprisingly, during the situation in the hospital and holding him, we kept him with us for almost the full day. All of that kind of seems kind of more peaceful now that I look back at it. Having that time with him, I think it was the leaving the hospital that was the hardest. Um, they try to do everything. They make the castings, the handprints, the footprints, and then they give you a teddy bear. uh, I know they mean well with it all, but it's almost like here's like a little token. You can't leave with your kid, but here's a teddy bear. So I think that was probably the hardest point because then you see everyone in the elevators and they're looking at you like, oh, hey, how's everything going? And then I think they look down and they realize, and then it's super awkward. And I think it's the pity look that you get from people. I
Right.
remember being wheeled back from the OR with him in my arms, and like just the people in the hallways, that pity look. I think that's one of the part that stings the most when I look back. Now that it's been a bit of time and I've gone through a lot of growth with therapy, and at this point, I think, it was all part of his plan to make me to where I am today. So I am very thankful for him and the path we've gone because I don't think we'd be where we are today. But I think when I look back, the hardest points and the hardest memories were the way people looked at us.
Right. I know the exact look you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, oh gosh, it's like we're about to have our happiest moment, or like, like our daughter just gave birth, we're happy, and then they see that. It's like it's almost like you ruin their day too. And it's like, uh, it's a heavy feeling. I don't even know. It's like even to this day, I could remember those looks like there was nothing. And then when I was lucky enough with my rainbow baby, is like the total opposite. I remember getting wheeled in from the OR because, of course, with what I had, and since he was so premature the first time, I had to have a classical C-section. So I had the incision normal on the outside, but inside they cut along the abdominal muscles. So it's less trauma for the micro preemies being pulled out. So because of that reasoning, I can only ever have C-sections because going into labor or pushing can cause it to burst. So I had to have a C-section and I was being wheeled out the same way. And it's very weird going into an OR after something like that. It's like as soon as you go in, you feel like everything's about to happen the same thing again, or you just relive it as if it was like that moment again.
Right.
And being wheeled through, but now it's like seeing people's smiles. It was just such a surreal, crazy feeling because it's as much as everything was great happening with him at the current moment, it's like all I could also do was think about everything that had happened almost 4 years prior. And so after all of that had happened, it was pretty rough few months. We had decided around the 3 month mark with the okays from the doctor, we would try again. Uh, I, again, naive, thought, the first time it only took us a couple months, 3 months. It might be quick this time too. At least that's what I was hoping. And, you hear all these little things like, after a loss, you're even more fertile and all this. So I'm like, here, high hopes, like, oh my God, it's going to happen quick. Let's get this going. That was not our case. Um, I think we had tried almost 9 months, and then I had reached out to our old OB about seeing what else we can try, and that's when he started putting me on letrozole, which was a fertility med, and we did like cycle monitoring where I got ultrasounds to tell me when I was ovulating, when's the best time to try, and everything like that. We did that for a few more months, still nothing, and then when we moved back into our part of the city we grew up in, I had reached out to another fertility clinic that was there, and we kind of did the same procedures with them, but it was a little more in depth, a little bit more blood work was redone. Um, and everything was coming back perfectly fine for the both of us, except I just didn't ovulate, which is one of my things with PCOS. I don't always ovulate. Sometimes my periods could be 3, 4 months. I think the longest I had it was almost a 200-day in between. Um, and the difference with them, they had the trigger shot, which I would take right before ovulation. And we did that for about 3, 4, 5 rounds. And again, no luck. I had gotten to the point that I'm just like, it's probably not going to happen for us. There are some very, very dark moments because when we went through a bunch of therapy a few months after our initial loss, we did a group therapy, which was amazing. I love the people we got to meet and hearing their stories and feeling, we're not alone. That was probably the hardest part in the beginning because it was not something I was ever expecting or ever thought of. I didn't have a lot of people around me who went through it. At the moment, that's what I thought. When I was open about things that had happened and opened about our loss, people were reaching out to me saying, like, it happened to them as well. And then we did the group therapy, and I got to meet some more wonderful parents of angels, and we shared our stories. I think it was a 9 week program we were in. And then it was when we were trying where it seemed it was happening for everybody else. Um, it was also people who, it's their first time trying and boom. And I'm like, they're almost a year out, and I'm like, there was definitely a lot of jealousy happening. And I think that's one point where I had to take a break a little bit from social media and I had to go do some separate therapy too, because there's a lot of hatred and jealousy going around. But it was more so I hated myself. I hated my body. I hate how it was letting me down and it wasn't working and it wasn't giving me the one thing I really, really wanted, which was at this point, I had such empty arms. Like I just really wanted to be a mom. And everyone's like, well, you're still a mom. You're still a mom. But it doesn't feel that way. It's like you have that love for your child that's not here, but you can't do anything. You're not mothering that baby. And for us, it's because it was our first baby. So like I didn't have any other children that could almost, in a sense, distract or keep me busy. So all I
Right.
had was myself. And when I was home, I think I took about 6 months off to do a lot of that therapy. And when I was home alone, like it's all I could think about, and seeing it happening for everybody else. And if these other people already had kids to begin with too, it just it hurt because it's like I was happy for them, but I was sad for myself. It's like, what am I doing wrong that it seems to be fine? Everyone's getting their like happy dreams come true, and like mine just kept getting worse and worse because it's like the more the cycles weren't working, the more I'm like, this is never going to happen.
I know.
And
Yeah,
then
we went through PCOS and infertility too. So I know the exact feelings you are describing.
yeah, it's rough, and like you just want to be happy for everybody. But at the same point, it's like your hurt on the inside for yourself is going to outweigh that happiness a lot of the times. And it's like, at first, you're like, you almost put on that fake smile right to them. And you're like, oh my God, I'm so happy for you. And then at home, as soon as you say that, you go home and you start crying. And you cry and
Yes.
you cry. And I don't know how many nights I had cried. I remember there's one night I had to leave the house and I went for a walk. And I think that was like the one time I contemplated, is life worth living if I didn't have a kid? It was definitely a dark moment at that point. That was probably the one point in my life where I'm like, I don't know if I want to be here because I don't see, all I could think about is growing old and not having anyone be able to come visit me or having any legacy or to teach your kids the way of life and help them grow, and like to not have any of that. I'm like, is there a way that I can be happy without having a kid? And there was a lot of growth that happened in that time and a lot of changes that needed to be done. I had talked with my fertility doctor, and the problem with PCOS and HELLP syndrome, it had lasted me with a liver disease that I never had before. And my liver was broken for so many years after that. My weight had gone out of control. When you add the liver not working, the PCOS, all the hormone medications, I think I had gained probably almost 40, 50 pounds. And I was already a big girl to begin with, but it was now getting out of control. My back ache, my legs ache. So my fertility doctor's like, it probably is not best for us to continue doing this right now. I think it was her that also told me, she's like, I think what might be best at this moment is we take care of you. And so she had referred me to get the gastric bypass done. Um, my metabolism was always pretty ruined too, because I had done a weight loss thing years ago but I did it badly where I was almost starving myself. So no matter what I ate, healthy, unhealthy, like I was still going to gain weight. My metabolism was shot. So the gastric bypass was the route we decided to take, more so to also try to heal my liver and, make me a stronger vessel to hopefully one day carry a baby. And going in this path gave me a bit of hope that something's obviously going to change with me. Still don't know if we're going to have a kid, but I'm going to have a different look on life and things are going to start changing. And luckily, I'm not a very patient person, clearly. Luckily, my process with getting the gastric bypass went by very fast compared to some that I know are still in the process after a couple years. The longest wait was probably when the referral got sent to when I got my first phone call. And I think that was probably about like a May 2020, and I got the call in November 2020. And then the first appointments I had was mid-December 2020, and I had my surgery by March 17th to 2021. So
Wow.
luckily it went very quick on my end. Um, and then you know what? I was like, at that point, I'm like, I'm about to have a life that I have not had in a very long time. I'm going to be able to do things that I haven't been able to do in a very long time, if ever. Like, I just want to enjoy this. So I decided at that point, you know what? We're going to put trying to conceive on the back burner. I think that was the first time I felt a little bit of relief where I'm like, We're making a decision. We're not trying. We're going to focus on the process of the surgery and then enjoying life after, lose some weight, get active, and just live life. And then I was starting to have fun again. I actually had genuine smiles. I was able to enjoy the things that were going on and I didn't feel bad. It still did hurt when other people I knew were getting pregnant either easily or they were just having another kid. But it didn't sting as bad because I'm like, you know what? It might happen, but later on. Right now, it's me time. Let's have fun. I'm still in my 20s. We've had a very hard marriage because this, again, all happened in our first year of marriage, our loss. So having gone through that, changing jobs, which is a whole other story, but changing jobs, moving, this all happened probably within the first 2 years, and we made it out strong. And I think the hardest thing to do as a couple is going through the loss of a child. And the fact that we were able to do that and be strong on the end, you know what? I don't think there's very much else that could break us. So I am very thankful for my husband. I'm thankful for the support that we did have and currently have with most of our friends and family at the moment. And they were always rooting us on from whatever we decided to do. And well, surgery went well. I had lost about 90 pounds in 5 months.
Which is
And
amazing.
yes, it was great. And, I still was on the process of we aren't going to try till at least a year, make sure everything's good. Well, um, I guess it was the first time we had tried without any protection. At this point, where I was just like, if it's gonna happen, it'll happen. But I'm here, I'm like, after all the trials and tribulations we had trying, I'm like, it's not gonna happen. So don't worry about it. Yeah, 2 weeks later.
Surprise.
Yeah. I was like, the amount of like shock, awe, and laughter that came out of me when I saw that little pink line, I'm like, no, it can't be. And then I saw it again and again, and I'm like, not gonna lie, my first reaction was like, oh crap. I'm like, I didn't think this was going to happen, especially, and now I'm thinking, oh God, I just had the surgery. Is this going to ruin? Like, am I just putting now us both at risk? Because I honestly thought it was never going to happen. And during our trying to conceive journey prior, in the very beginning, we had two chemical pregnancies. I saw the line, I got super excited. I shared to a couple close friends and family. And, I was watching sometimes the line get darker or it was not getting darker. And then I remember one time I thought the line was dark at that point, and I think the next day I tried a digital and it said no. And then I tried a line test again and it went away. And I think that was actually one of the times too that had led me to do that walk. I think that's where I was at my lowest was like, okay, life, how much jokes do you want to play against me? And so I had this very bad obsession of testing and testing and testing and probably spent way too much money than I'd like to admit on tests. Dollar store test, first response test, Amazon easy at home test, Clear
It's
Blue.
hard to stop.
Oh my God. And that's one thing I remember people telling me is like, why are you testing? You had a positive, just wait. I'm like, you clearly have not gone through this. Um, like I was basically watching to see if the line would go away or if it was getting darker. It wasn't that I needed to confirm if I was pregnant or not. It's just like, is this going to stay or is it going to go? And I remember I went actually on a yoga retreat right when I had found out I was pregnant too. And I was trying to find the pharmacies in that city, being like, oh, dang, I'm out of tests. I need to go get more. And I was texting like my husband every few hours with a new photo. And even he's just like, hey, stop spending money. But it's like I needed that confirmation. And then eventually, like I was lucky, my doctor let me get a early ultrasound to make sure everything was in the right spot because that was my other fear. It's like, okay, if I'm pregnant, but now what if it's going to be ectopic or anything like that? And then everything worked out. His pregnancy was pretty textbook healthy. I had no hypertension. The only difference we did this time was I was put on aspirin. And then everything actually, yeah, it worked out. I was told I would have to deliver by 37 weeks due to the fact I can't go in labor with the way my surgery was done previously. And again, it would be the C-section. And unless I went into somehow labor early, then we would obviously go for the C-section right away as an emergency situation, but luckily things were good. I remember with my OB, I was just like, so 37 weeks falls on a Saturday. Are we gonna do it on the Saturday? She's like, well, let's hold out then until the Monday. I'm like, why not the Friday? And she's like, well, you won't be 37 weeks, you'll be 36 and 6. I'm like, I don't want to be a day over 37 though when this happens. And luckily after I did have a lot of stress. So I did have lots of appointments, and every appointment luckily had an ultrasound. Like I think for the while, it was like every 4 weeks I'd have an ultrasound plus the regular appointment. And then I think around 24 or so or 28 weeks, it went to every 2 weeks. And then it went every 1 week by the time I was 30 or 32. And the length of like appointments being those I think are normal kind of time frames. However, it was the fact that I got an ultrasound with every single one. And I think that really helped me. And little man was very strong and very big and wrecking on my back. So I'm so glad I was able to convince her for the 36 and 6. And I remember when we went into that OR, we were scheduled, I think, for 10 or 10:30 a.m. on April 8th. And for some reason, the time just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And I was like getting so frustrated because again, patience, not my specialty. And then it ended up being around 12 that they're like, hey, we're time to go. And I looked at my husband, I'm like, we're not about to give birth to this kid at the same time as his brother. Like I've had so many little signs from him, like knowing that like it's going to be good, like he's got us, he's watching over us. And then it was the timing, and I'm like, really? And then it ended up being he wasn't born at the exact same time, but he was born 21 minutes later from him. Same
Wow.
within it was within 12 o'clock's hour of 12 o'clock. I'm like, y'all couldn't even figure out your own hour. No, he had to hold him in there, and it was 21 minutes apart, which to me, our firstborn was born January 21st. So I was like, I see what you did.
That is
He had
crazy.
to add his little touch to be like, I got this, and you're going to remember every time. And luckily, like when she was pulling him out, he was already crying before she even got his shoulders out. And she's like, he is a strong boy. And after that, she's like, maybe the boy's more like a 38, 39 weeker. Like, and we were lucky he didn't need any NICU time. He came to the room with us, and we got to leave 2 days later. And now he's an 8-month-old, 25 and a half pound chunks. He's almost crawling. He says, Mama. And it's been the best part of my life is having him around, and we do a lot of things to keep his brother's memory alive. And as he grows, I will always make him known around the house, and his brother will know him. um but also going through that, there's a lot to it that I just don't know if I would want to do it again, to be honest. um but yeah, that's basically a little gist of the story that has got me to get to know you and be a part of this. And so grateful you're doing this because it's amazing.
Well, I'm grateful for you coming on and sharing. It's one of those things that so many people don't want to talk about, especially, I mean, I think it's kind of easier to write it out than to like speak it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think going through a loss, and I learned there are so many different communities when it comes to loss, whether it's Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. There's so much people talking about it now, and I don't know if it's because it happened to us that I was more aware of it, but it's like it's almost been nonstop that I hear about it, or I see like celebrities talking about their losses, and I'm like, it's crazy how people are being more open about it, and I love it because it's making it less of a taboo. And I'm very open on both my Instagram and my Facebook about our loss and the things I still do to this day to keep his memory alive. Like I just got our boy his Christmas stocking, and I got his brother one too. I have a nice white one with his name on it, and then I have a blue one for our rainbow. And there's just I'll always have things that will keep his memory going. And I think with people being so open, it's nice. It's That was the hardest part, was when I felt so alone in the beginning, and then when I started to get to know there's others that went through this and where I could reach out. And I remember posting my story a lot of how I was feeling or what was going on. I had someone reach out to me and is like, you know what? We just suffered a loss. We had our 12-week scan. There was no heartbeat. And she was one of my Facebook friends. And honestly, to this day, almost 3, 4 years later, she's one of my closest friends now. And she had her rainbow about 7 or 8 months prior. Like as soon as she was being almost induced for hers was when I found out I was pregnant with ours.
Oh, I love
And
that.
they're so destined to be husband and wife, FYI. But if it was that one person I could help sharing my story, that's all I need. As much as people are like, you got to move on or why you still talking about him? And I'm like, I help that one person. That's all I need right there.
I always
And
say that too. If it just helps even one person by sharing, my story, then I'll have done what I wanted to do.
no, for sure. And we're not in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s anymore. It's not all hush hush. You don't feel your feelings behind closed doors anymore. These days people are open and they share, and there are growing tribes of people that could be there for you throughout all different experiences in life. And I think that's almost like the hardest part, because like now it's like our generation, we're used to being open now, whereas the older generation is still closed off, so they still think we're like crazy for sharing. Or like, if someone passes away, they want to act like, it's done and over with, don't talk about them no more, none of that,
Right.
which is not how I'm going to live my life. And you know what? I Where we're at today is because of our firstborn. He gave me the thrive to get a better job with people that are a bit more understanding, find a better house that, if it were to happen again, we'd be in a better place and I wouldn't be seeing, the room that could have been all the time. And within the few years after this had all happened, we moved back to our home city that we loved. I got a new job that I excelled in so much and went up the ladder as best as I could. And we're both also going through my surgery and everything. My husband and I are in a better place now than we ever been. We've got each other's backs. When I can't do stuff, like he'll be there to hold me up, and going through all of that and seeing him be there for me in those situations, it gave me that extra, confidence that when, this happens, I can literally leave my kid with him and be like, he's got this, we're good. And no matter what I feel, going through postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and, my bad days, my rage days, like he is there and he will always help me. And I think going through all of these trials in just our almost 5 years of marriage, like there's no one else I would have rather want to do this with.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your story today. I think it'll help a lot of people hearing what you had to say.
Thank you so much for having me. There's definitely a lot of different aspects. So I'm hoping there's someone out there that I can reach and help feel a little bit less alone, like how I once felt. And, if anyone ever wants to reach out who are going through some of the similar things, or, dealing with postpartum afterwards, I'm currently going through that right now. As everyone thinks, as soon as you have your rainbow, that, things are all sunshine and happiness and you're all happy, everything's fixed. But it's still a struggle. Like, still seeing sometimes pregnancy announcements are still hard, even though I don't even know if I want to be pregnant again. It can still be hard. And even though I have the best little boy ever, uh, it's definitely hard moments. And, memories and triggers are still there. So if anyone ever wants to reach out and chit chat, I'm here.
Thank you for sharing your story with us, Melissa. One of the things that you touched on was about the jealousy you felt towards others who easily got pregnant, and also about hating your body for not doing the things it's supposed to do. I think this is really important to talk about because so many of us go through these feelings, especially when we go through infertility and loss, or going through both of them. We see others so easily get what we're trying to achieve, some that don't even seem like they're trying. It just seems to happen so easily for everyone else. And, we're just left wondering, why not me? Why can't it happen for me? Why does it have to be so hard? And it isn't that we want them to suffer. We don't want them to go through what we have. We don't want them to experience loss or infertility. But it just seems unfair that we have to go through so much heartache when we're both trying to get to the same outcome. If you're having these feelings, know that it's normal and it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad family member. It doesn't make you a bad friend for feeling this way. These things we've been through, the things that we're going through, aren't easy. They're heartbreaking. They're traumatic. and they come with so many different thoughts and emotions. It's okay to feel what you feel. You certainly aren't ever alone in your feelings, I can promise you that. And then also there's so many of us that go through anger towards our own bodies. We feel they failed us. They let us down. They weren't able to keep our babies safe. They weren't doing the one thing that we're told, that our bodies are supposed to do. Or not the only thing, but one of the main important things that women's bodies are supposed to do, we're taught is to have babies. And when our body can't even do that, it feels like it's letting us down. And again, it's okay to be angry. It's all part of the process. I've heard often that we only get one body, so we have to love the one we have. I found it really hard to do this sometimes when we were struggling to get pregnant, and especially when I had my losses. But now, as time has gone on, I've really tried to appreciate it more for the things it can do instead of thinking only of the ways it has failed me. It may not be easy to do this at first, but I think it's important that we try. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.